So our service might be a little short today. And don't doubt this when I say it. I have a short sermon for you. It's my gift to you. A short sermon. And I know some of you front row over here are thinking, no, it's not. It never is when he says that. It really is. I owe you a short sermon. Last week you endured much. 54 minutes. I mean, it's just terrible. I know you watched during the week several 90-minute movies, but still, 54 minutes of a sermon is really, really long. I know you watch lots of hour-long shows, but still, 54 minutes is really, really long. I know you listen to podcasts and things that are an hour or two, but still, 54 minutes is really, really long. But you endured it last week, and you handled it like champs. And there was a lot of information. I think that why we keep Sabbathing, because it's a distinctive, it deserves a little extra attention. And it got that last week. This week, we move on to the 5th commandment. And part of the reason why it's a short sermon is because, well, I just need to keep your trust and your affection and stay in your good graces, I hope. So when I go along really one week, I have to give it back to you the next week. This is like comp time. So I got to give you a little something back next week. But also because this is a pretty straightforward commandment. And as complicated as I'd want to make it, or as interesting as I'd want to make it, it pretty much is what it is. And it's relatively simple. So let's get to it. We're going to read Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 12. Remember, we're adding every time, because every time I want us to read all the commandments that came before this one, and we're kind of building every week. Exodus 20, starting at verse 1. And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children of the sin for the sin of their fathers to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your manservant or maidservant, nor your animals, nor the alien within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the 7th day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. I'd like to speak to all the children here for a moment, especially mine. This is a great commandment, isn't it? Honor. I wish you all could have seen my son's face. Eyebrows went up. It's a great commandment. Honor your father and your mother. My mom is, some of you have met my mom and both my parents. Wonderful people. My mom's one of the sweetest ladies in the world. She's really fun, really sweet, really kind lady. She has a certain few fears or anxieties that I would argue might be slightly irrational. One of them is that she's deathly afraid of flying. She flew once when she was a little kid and never again. Like, there's not enough drugs to get her on an airplane. It's just not going to happen. So she'll never see a place that you have to get to by airplane. There's just no way it's going to happen. Years ago, we were having one of these conversations about when my mom also likes to plan ahead. She plans for every doomsday scenario, what she wants to be done if this happens or this happens. So she had an eye condition. She thought she might lose her vision. This was 25 years ago. So she memorized the hymnal because she loves singing hymns. So she thought I could lose my sight. So she memorized the hymnal. Here we are 30 years later. She can still read it fine. But she memorized it way back then, just so my mom's like a machine with hymns, and verses. She diligently spent hours a day memorizing the hymnal. So she prepares for these scenarios. So one of the scenarios she's prepared her children for, is when she's really old, and if she gets kind of senile and can't talk or communicate anymore. She's worried that then we wouldn't know what she wants or what she likes to do. So she's made sure that we know what she wants to eat or drink and what things are important to her and what to do for entertainment. She says, I just like to watch people. Some people are bird watchers or TV watchers. My mom's a people watcher. She just likes to watch people. So she always says, take me in my little wheelchair and wheel me to the airport and let me watch people go back and forth all day because that's really fun. And I'm like, okay, but I like that because that sounds cheap and easy as far as caring for your parents. So sure, I'll wheel you to the airport and we'll sit you there all day and you watch people. So my mom says this will be fun. But then I'm thinking the airport is a weird place to pick because she's so deathly afraid of flying. So I'm like, now I'm thinking there's that little, fleshly, sinister, kind of poking sun kind of thing that says, if my mom's not nice to me, I might just put her on an airplane. Because she can't say anything or do anything. Let's just wheel her onto an airplane. I'll buy her a ticket to fly somewhere, and that'll show her, right? Because she can't do anything about it. And if she's really mean to me, and my mom's going to watch this eventually. She's going to find this on YouTube, and I'm going to be in so much trouble. If my mom's really mean to me, I'll get her like a 10-trip multi-city thing where she just has to fly and fly and fly and fly. Doesn't that sound terrible? That would be mean to my mom. So I probably won't do that, Mom. Probably won't do that. I'm just kidding. I won't do that. Why won't I do that to my mom? Because you'd all decide I was a terrible human and fire me. Also, because that's not honoring my mom. That's not what my mom wants. My mom wants to watch people. I should let her watch people without putting her on an airplane. Part of this commandment is to love your parents. Love them. Your father, your mother. Love them. What exactly does it mean when it says honor your father and your mother? First of all, I don't want to just pass over this commandment because there's not a lot to it. I can pick it apart a little bit without saying or pointing out that it says honor your father and your mother. There are some things in Scripture that are a given. It doesn't say honor both of your fathers. It doesn't say honor both of your mothers. It says honor your father and your mother. This commandment assumes something in the family unit, that there ought to be a father and a mother and children. That is God's ideal family unit system. That's a given in this commandment. I don't want to pass over it without mentioning it. So the word that we have to sort out is, we know what father is, we know what mother is, we know who the children are. So the only word left then that deserves any focus or attention or examination is honor. What did this word, honor them, mean? And when you go to the big books, the commentaries, and you pull out the Hebrew word for honor here, it has a weird translation or a weird meaning. It actually is kind of like their heavy precious metal, gold or silver. So the idea here in honor your father and mother is to view or see your father and mother as precious to you, really valuable, really important to you, really important in your life, really valuable in your life. And so that does change the meaning a little bit. It's not honor just as in, hey kids, do what your mother tells you to. Although that's there, we're going to get to that in a minute. But it's more than that. It's really an appreciation of value, seeing your parents as a treasure. I pointed to my daughter when I said that. Seeing your parents as a treasure. In the context of what's happening here in this sort of covenant that God is laying out with his people, like, if you're going to be my people, I want you to live this way. I want you to kind of think of this as what is God trying to accomplish when he says this? Remember with the first couple of commandments, what did we say God was trying to accomplish? He was trying to really help the people understand who he is. So what is his identity like? That he's God, that he's the only one like him. He's different than anything and everyone else. There is no one else in his category, right? And then that he can't be reduced or manipulated. He can't be shrunk down into some little idols. And you're not to have any other and worship any other gods, but you're also not to try to shrink him down and manipulate him somehow. So he's outside of us. He's beyond us and outside of our control. And then he gives the whole name thing, not to take his name casually or use it in vain. And then the Sabbath commandment is really for us to have this weekly reminder that we get back into focus with God. So it's God's way of saying, I don't want you to forget these three things. So every week I want us to reconnect. I have this holy time that's set aside where you stop doing all the other stuff, and we have this holy sacred moment between us so that you don't forget. Are you with me? Are you tracking with me? Does that make sense so far? So then think about this commandment. God's saying, so here's the things about my identity that you need to know. And here's the time every week when we're going to reconnect. And then if God reveals that and shares that with this group of people, but if they never pass it down through the generations, it dies with them. Right? If God has this conversation and says, it's with this group of people, but you don't need to talk to your children about this. It's just for you and I. Then there's one generation of God's people, or people that are in this relationship with God. So later on, when we get into Deuteronomy, you go back and you read through, there's the reiterating of the commandments, and tie it on your doorposts, write it on your gates, talk to your children all the time, share these things with your children, teach these things to your children. As this gets unpacked throughout the law of Moses, there's this idea that parents have an obligation to pass these things that they know about God down. So that every generation shares this with the next generation and so on. Otherwise, if that doesn't happen, then these two need to someone in between them right here. If that doesn't happen, remember that, honor your parents thing? If that doesn't happen, if it doesn't get passed down, it's going to stop somewhere. Makes sense, right? It's going to stop. There is a spiritual heritage piece to this. God's saying, I'm revealing this to this generation, but I want it to go down through. That's not going to happen unless parents who are teaching these things are honored. Respect and carry on the faith and teachings of your parents so that God will be known through the generations. That's my adapted interpretation sentence of this commandment. Respect and carry on the faith and teachings of your parents so that God will be known through the generations. One generation to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. We're thousands of years into this. If the older generations were not passing this down to the next generations, this would have been lost. That's an incredibly important concept. And I think that's what's at the heart of this commandment. It's not just about the relationship between every individual parent and every one of their individual children. There's a much bigger picture of this. And this is the ideal scenario that God has in mind. And it requires honor, respect, appreciation, value, treasuring the things that the previous generation has to pass on to you. So really quick, I want to talk through what honoring your parents might look like in the most practical sense at some different spots in life. So first I want to talk to the children and the teenagers in here. The children and the teenagers, it does mean what we think it means in a very simple, plain reading of the text. Kids, honor your parents. Well, guess what? You need to obey your parents. You need to obey your parents. The Bible says so, not me. I mean, I say it too, but because the Bible says it. You need to show respect to your parents. You need to listen to your parents. There's a spot in Ephesians 6:2 where Paul refers to this commandment. Actually, I'll just read a few verses at the beginning of Ephesians 6 because it'll be familiar to you, but it's good. Paul's writing to the church, and he's writing about family relationships, and he writes about husbands and wives right before this in Ephesians 5 about, wives, submit to your husbands. Husbands, lay yourself down for your wives. And he talks about all this family relationship stuff. And at the beginning of verse 6, he says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So, like everything where Paul gets into the family relationships, he doesn't let anybody off the hook. He says, fathers, you have a responsibility to bring your children up in the things of the Lord. And when he says fathers, he's talking to mothers too. Parents, you have a responsibility to bring your children up in the ways of the Lord. But he says that's only going to work if the children honor their parents. Children need to respect their parents, listen to their parents, and honor their parents so that this thing works. So, most basic sense for you young kids here, obey, listen, respect, honor your parents. As we move into young adulthood, and we have several in the room that are in this young adult category, the say 17, 18, into the mid-20s. And then moving even into, I'll call it middle adulthood, approaching middle age. What does it look like from there and in that point of life to honor your parents? The parent-child relationship changes. It's not so much a do this, do that, yes mom, yes dad, and then the household. It becomes more of a sort of a coaching relationship from parent to child. But young adults in this category, I would say this: to honor your parents means recognize that there is wisdom there. Even if you don't get it or don't think so or don't understand them, recognize that there is some wisdom there. It is young adults, oftentimes, it's kind of a cliche in our culture, they just think they know everything and that their parents have become idiots all of a sudden. Yes, it's true. And I remember my mom saying that about me at that age, my parents in general saying that about all their kids at that age. Like there's a time where the parent just can't tell that young adult anything because that young adult knows everything and their parent is dumb and knows nothing, has nothing to give to them. Listen, honor your father and mother means you need to get your head out of that space and realize that there's wisdom there, that your parents have something to offer you at this time and in this season. In fact, at every time, in every season. And you should tap into that. You should receive it. And so as an adult, even for me in this spot where once you get into your 40s, you have a different relationship with your parents, I still need to understand and recognize that my parents have a lot of wisdom still. That my parents have experience, that my parents have knowledge, that my parents have things to speak into my life and contribute and offer to me. And to overlook that would be foolish on my part. I need to respect that. And another piece of that, and this becomes a big one, as you get into your 20s and 30s and get busy with your own adult life, and you're still trying to honor your parents, is to spend time with them. To make time for your parents, to maintain and keep a relationship with your parents. They will feel honored by that. They will feel connected with you and engaged in your life by that. And they will be able to do what that bigger picture was of passing things down to you when you spend time together. If you don't spend any time with them and don't nurture that relationship at all, then it's not going to work. Then we move into our older age and our parents' elderly years. Now, how do we honor our parents when our parents are in their very old age, in their golden years, and their last years? You know, as a counselor, I've counseled many adults through caring for their aging parents. And questions come up like, when do I step into their care? When do I grab control of things or grab the reins? Or what's their level of independence versus their level of needing help, and being mindful of both, but respecting both, but helping them see both? And do we put them in a nursing home, or do we not put them in a nursing home when they get to a point where they need a lot of care? And the answers are, that can look different in every situation. In one situation, to honor your parents is to put them in a place where they can get proper professional care. In another situation, to honor your parents is to keep them at home and care for them there if that's possible. There isn't an action here that's the honorable thing. It's doing what's best for your parent because you love them, because they're valuable to you, because you care about them. So to honor your parents means I'm going to do right by you, even as you're aging, and as I can come alongside and help. Are you all with me? You're all looking at me blankly, and I'm not sure if it's because you're either struggling with this or you're wondering what your kids are going to do with you. Okay, so honoring your parents can look really different, but the point is that you're understanding that they're valuable and they're important to you, and you want to take care of them and do what's best for them. Okay, so little kids, teenagers, young adults, middle-aged, moving into being a full-grown adult, taking care of your aging or even dying parents. How do you honor your parents in their transition out of this life, or even when they're gone? And that's an important conversation, because you can honor them by maintaining their legacy. You can honor them by showing respect and love and saying good things about them and remembering the good things about them. And so even after your parents are gone, we continue to honor our parents and recognize what they had to contribute. Now, as I go through all the ages and I talk about when we're little, our parents are kind of our caretakers. And then something happens where we're sort of almost closer to peers next to each other, but we're still honoring our parents. And then to some degree, many of us will become caretakers of our parents. This is a shift that happens through life. In all phases, we honor them. Some of you, as I talk through the whole thing, are thinking to yourself, but what if you didn't have great parents? What if you, don't make eye contact with me right now, my kids. That's not a good time to look at me like, No. What if you didn't have, or don't have great parents? What if you have a strained or broken relationship with parents? What if you have some real difficulty there? And that's a fair and good question, and something worthy of consideration. What if your parents aren't Christians or weren't Christians? What if your parents are or have been abusive or neglectful or just not good or helpful or supportive or attentive parents? What do you do? And how do you honor them? And what does that look like? Well, the answer is that can be a really difficult situation. There's a lot for us to talk about in every individual circumstance. I had great parents. I still have great parents. I would find it difficult to say how exactly they could or should do it better. I have really great parents, so it's really easy for me to talk about this and say, I can honor my parents, and I honor them this way and this way. And my dad, it's his birthday today, actually. So we sang happy birthday to him out in the car, and I wrote a little Facebook post for him this morning with some pictures of our last outing together when we went to Mayberry, and about how my dad has always been such a great role model for me, and he still is. It's easy for me to do that because I have such good parents. They've earned every bit of honor and respect that I can give them. But what if that's not the case? What if that's not your situation? I'll say this. I don't think that if you have boundaries with parents because of bad parenting or abuse or neglect or any other kinds of issues that have gone on between you and parents, I don't necessarily think that God is saying that we need to put ourselves into a day in and day out relationship where it's destructive for us. I don't think he's asking us to necessarily do that with anyone. I think it's okay to have relational boundaries. Can you honor your parents even in that? And how do you honor your parents even in that? Even if you're not going to have close relationship and good relationship because there's something really dysfunctional or broken there. Everybody can't read this commandment and say, well, my parents are good, godly people, so of course I want to take everything they pass down and absorb it all and glean from them because it's not good. Okay, that's fair. So this becomes less of an individual uniform application, and it becomes more of what do you do in your situation. And sometimes the best that you might be able to do is keep boundaries that are safe enough where you don't have or create any additional friction. Or where you decide that even if your parent has been a lousy parent, you're not going to publicly disparage them. You're not going to go out and tell everybody or broadcast, this is my parent, he's a jerk. This is where my parent has fallen short. So maybe back in the 90s and early 2000s, the talk shows like Jerry Springer is not the right thing to go out and talk to everybody about your parents' particular dysfunction or shortcomings. So maybe you honor them by just sort of letting their flaws be their flaws. Maybe you honor them by giving a lot of grace, by offering a lot of forgiveness. Maybe you honor them by setting up boundaries that make it so that you can live your life without creating additional problems. It's not an easy thing to navigate, but even if you have less than ideal parents. By the way, I think sometimes I'm like, I think I'm a pretty good parent, but my kids will be in therapy when they're in their 30s talking about me and what if, the crazy things I said or did that may set them off on a detour somewhere. They will be, because none of us are perfect, and therefore none of us are perfect kids, and none of us are perfect parents. It is what it is. But I think even in that situation, we can honor our parents. So, now that I've said all that, and I've brought us into like the super, like really intensely personal possible applications of this, I want to finish by zooming way back out. Because, Paul said in Ephesians, he said it's the first commandment that comes with a promise. And it has the second half of the commandment, honor your father and mother, so that you may live long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. I think a better English word than promise, again, we go there to what the word Paul uses in Ephesians, go to the Greek and you dig around a little bit. I think better words are reward or reason. And this I don't think is individual, because it doesn't make sense as an individual application. So as if it's saying, okay, everybody, whether your parent was good or bad, do these certain things to honor your parent, and then you're going to live a long life. That doesn't make sense, because people honor their parents really well and die young. That is not the direct cause and effect of what's being said here. It's not you individually keep this commandment well and then you'll live for a long time. That is not, I don't think that's even remotely a correct application of this. I think we need to remember here that these commandments are communal. That these commandments are given now from here on out, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, are about how we live in society with other people. How society's supposed to live. How God designed so that a community can live. So these are communal and societal things. There's a reward and a reason that if people live like this, in this kind of way, that they honor their parents. And even honoring their parents might mean not their biological parents, but honoring those coming before. That if the older generations, they have something to pass down, if that's honored by the younger generations, that society will survive. That civilization, that community will survive stronger and longer because they respect and honor the elders and what they're passing down. Doesn't that just make sense? if a generation learns good agricultural practices, and they spend 8 generations improving on that, and then this generation comes along as a bunch of know-it-alls and says, we're not going to listen to the generations before us, we've got a better idea, and does something really stupid with the planting that year, and then has no food, they're all going to die. Because they chose not to listen to what was being passed down. You with me as a practical application? So take that application and apply it to every area of life, but especially in this context to spiritual things. God is saying, this is who I am. This is my revelation of who I am. This is my nature. And you all need to stop every Sabbath and remember that. But you all need to pass this down so that everyone knows who I am and everyone knows what's happening here. It is communal. It's a community emphasis. I kind of feel like this is what's happening in our culture right now. We're in one of these seasons, and it happens, I don't know, in American history, I feel like it happens every 60 years-ish, 70 years. There's a generation that seems to pop up and say, we know what every generation has said before, but we've decided none of that's true. And I feel like we're in that right now. Where it doesn't matter, every generation before us, for 70 years, everyone's agreed the sky's blue. We're all calling it yellow. We just decided. They don't know what they're talking. We're redefining terms. We're like, I've read this is not political, but this is philosophical, okay? I think that this commandment is an argument for conservatism. And I mean conservatism in its most basic definition. I'm not talking about a political party. I'm talking about conservatism. The idea of conservatives or conservatism is that we want to conserve the things that have been held as true for a long time. The idea of liberality is that we're open to a wide range of different possibilities. Those are the two kind of basic definitions of those two words. And this commandment is quite literally saying, don't just disregard what's passed down to you through the generations. Honor it. Respect it. Listen to it. Does it mean that you specifically have to agree with your particular biological parent on everything? No, it doesn't mean that, and that will never happen. But does it mean that you should think, they probably know some things, and I shouldn't disregard all that? Yes, it does mean that. And that you should honor that and give some respect. This is a communal commandment, that you will live longer, your society, your culture will be stronger for longer if you respect what comes from the generation before you. Honor your father and your mother, and you will live long in the land. Do this in your relationships. Do this in your family. Do this in your household. Do this in your society. And that is how we pass on the faith, and that is how we are stronger for longer in the things of God.